Every year, before the ancient Greeks sowed their seeds of grain, they celebrated Demeter, the goddess of agriculture. On earth, each morsel of food was sweet sustenance, while it ensured a permanent stay in the land of the dead. Demeter tended to the earth's field with her beloved daughter, Persephone, who inherited her mother's passions and grew into a bright young woman. All the while, a shadowy figure watched from below. Persephone was frolicking in a meadow with a freshwater nymph Yenice as they admired a blooming narcissus flower. They noticed it tremble in the ground. Suddenly, the earth split, and a terrifying figure arose. It was Hades, god of the dead and the underworld. He wrenched Persephone from Yenice, dragged her into inky chariot, and blasted back through the earth. Yenice wept so hard she dissolved, becoming one with the river. By the time Demeter arrived at the scene of the abduction, the crater in the meadow had closed, and Yenice and Persephone had vanished. Demeter sped to Mount Olympus for help. Many of the gods had witnessed the scene. They knew about the deal that paved the way for it. Zeus, Persephone's father, had granted Hades her hand in marriage without her consent, or Demeter's. But when faced with Demeter's pleas, the other gods stayed silent. So she searched alone. In grief and desperation, she neglected her usual tasks. Crops withered, and a great famine plagued the earth. As mortals began to perish, the gods grew wary. Who would worship them and offer tributes if humans disappeared? So Zeus ordered Demeter to stop her crusade and return to her duties, but she refused. Deep below, across the frigid river Styx, holes of the underworld, Persephone was waging her own protest. Expected her to serve as her wife and queen, but Persephone rebuffed the gods' refused food. She longed for her mother's company, her friends' laughter, and the sun's warmth. Persephone grew colder and lonelier. She was starving. She hungered for satisfying grains, crisp vegetables, and fresh fruit. Wandering the ghostly gardens, she contemplated the pomegranates that hung in heavily on their branches. Meanwhile, Demeter continued her hunt. She appealed to the all-seeing sun god Helios, whose rays had long warmed her crops. Indeed, when Helios drew his golden chariot across the sky that fateful day, saw what happened, and knew of the deal. Respect and sympathy for Demeter, Helios told her of Hades' demands, Zeus' betrayal, and Persephone's abduction. Furious and heartbroken, Demeter reached Mount Olympus and confronted Zeus, demanding their daughter's return. But Zeus declined. In her ravenous hunger, Persephone had eaten a few seeds from the pomegranate in the underworld. Medicine was enough to ensnare her in Hades forever. Demeter wouldn't accept this fate. She swore that if she wasn't reunited with Persephone, the fields would never be fertile again. The distinction between the earth and the underworld would soon dissolve. So, they made a pact. For 2/3 of the year, everything would return to the land of the living, but for the remainder, she would stay in the world of the dead. When Persephone ascended to earth, she and her mother rejoiced. Together, they showered the fields with rain and nurtured them with the sun. For mortals, Persephone's arrival came to herald the start of spring, but her descent always came too soon. Each time she returned to Hades, Demeter mourned, and the earth grew cold, dark, and unyielding, ushering the winter months. Knowing Demeter could be aroused from her grief, the humans stored their crops, stoked their fires, and awaited Persephone's safe return. And so it was that her transit marked the gradual turning of seasons, bittersweet compromise between life and death.
The characters of the myth are Persephone. Persephone was the wife of god Hades and the goddess queen of the underworld. She was also adored alongside her mother Demeter as the goddess of spring growth. Second is Hades. Hades was the god of the dead and the lord of the underworld. He presided over funeral rites and fought for the dead's right for a proper burial. He was also the god of the earth's buried treasure. From the fertile soil that fed the seed grain to the gold, silver, and other materials that were extracted. Third is Zeus. He is the god of the sky. Zeus is the powerful Greek goddess. He is the ruler, defender, and the father of all gods and mankind. Zeus is frequently shown as an older man with a beard and is symbolized by the lightning bolt and eagle. Fourth is Demeter. She was the ancient Greek goddess of food and agriculture, and one of the original 12 Olympians. She was the middle daughter of Cruz and Rhea. Fifth is Hecate, the deity of magic, witchcraft, spirit, and crossroads. Sixth is Helios. In Greek religion, the sun god, sometimes called a titan. He sailed around the northerly stream of the ocean in a giant cup every night, driving a chariot from east to west across the sky. Lastly, Gaia, sometimes known as Ge, is the goddess of the earth in Greek mythology. She was the mother of the other titans and the gigantes and the Erinyes, and the Cyclopes and the wife of Uranus, from whom she was separated by the titan Cronus, her last-born child by him. The story of Hades and Persephone takes place in the land of the living, which is the earth, where Demeter and her daughter Persephone lived before she was kidnapped by Hades, and the land of the dead or the underworld. Exposition. The story begins when Hades saw Persephone and he decided to kidnap her. Rising action happened when Hades and his brother Zeus created a lovely flower and planted it in the ground in the hopes that Persephone will pluck it. Climax happened when Persephone falls for the trap and picks the flower. The flower was extremely hard to remove, but once she did, it left a little hole in the earth. Persephone plunged into the pit as the hole became bigger. Falling action happened when Demeter looked desperately for her missing daughter but was unsuccessful. She eventually met Hecate, the goddess of magic, who informed her that her long-lost daughter was imprisoned in the underworld. The moment happened when Persephone was miserable for a long time before falling in love with Hades and living happily after with him. Persephone was cursed to spend 4 months of the year in the underworld. She was, however, permitted to spend the remaining 2/3 of the year with Demeter, her earth mother.
The myth's central theme is the power of mother's love for her child. We can see Demeter's love for Persephone when Demeter abandoned all her responsibilities, including her care for her crops, vegetables, and grains. After Hades abducted Persephone to the underworld, even confronting the Lord of the Dead, Hades to reclaim her daughter. The Greek mythology Persephone and Hades story use the point of view of third person, whereas the story told by a narrator or a writer who sees all the action. The speaker uses the pronouns of he, she, it, they, his, her, its, and theirs. And the type of third person point of view is omniscient. The purpose of this mythology story is to explain why the world has seasons rather than to teach a moral lesson. However, if there's a moral lesson to be learned in this beautiful story, it is to be cautious about accepting strangers' hospitality. It may be disastrous results or consequences. So now we proceed to the benefits of reading mythology and folklore. When we heard or read the word mythology and folklore, there is always one word might came up to every people's mind, which is the word story. Obviously, these two words are distinct, but they both serve the same purpose, which are to give a foundation for moral boundaries and to establish the basic standards for every man who lives on this earth, as well as to orient us into our literary background or our literature. There are numerous benefits or advantages in reading mythology and folklore. One of these are reading a variety of literary works contains timeless storytelling elements that are essential to understanding literature. It does not only give us insight into various cultures, such as similarities and differences, the importance of certain values, people's history, the effect of geography on histories, and so on. It can also help us to cultivate an appreciation for our own heritage, tradition, and other cultures. Furthermore, reading a wide range mythology and folklore stories provide us with many insights into the universal human experiences, gradually enriching people's or our imagination. Above all, mythology plays a very vital role for the reason that it becomes a foundation for a lot of religions that are practiced either ancient or modern. Folklore, on the other hand, illustrates what the origins of a group of people within one civilization, where they came from and what they should believe for, and so on.
Why should we read it? How is it relevant to our lives? What would be the outcome if we read one of these mythology and folklore? Reading is one of the most essential skills in learning, for reading is a powerful tool in gathering information and also exploring through one's eyes, mouth, and brain. To answer the question, why should we read mythology and folklore? Personally, I believe that reading mythology and folklore will not only entertain you readers, but will also enlighten you to the reality of our society today. It does help us stay relevant to the course of this world and learn from the cyclical mistakes that we have made as valuable humans. Virtues and wisdom are instilled within the pages and characters of every mythological story, and that is true to the human characteristics. Somehow, the relevance stays on the ground that we tread upon, and we are able to surpass the challenges of our lives through acquiring knowledge and understanding from reading this myth and folklores. The outcome will always be unexpected and expected to happen, only if we act with full understanding and vigilance as to how these stories teach us the way of life. Believe and trust that we can make things better for tomorrow. If we start today, the change that we long for must begin inside of us. That is why I'm persuading you as a reader to explore and discover, to analyze and criticize, to learn and acquire, to synthesize and construct your concepts towards your full potential. Until then, you will see that you can make a difference and empower yourself with all the pivotal learnings from these myths and folklores. Thank you.
I see